Hey, let's stay with all that breaking news out of the Supreme Court today, including major decisions on birthright citizenship and the rights of transgender athletes. Let's get right to CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford in Washington for us today. Jan, good to see you. First off, let's just start with the birthright citizenship case. Your takeaways from that decision.
Well, I mean, it was written by the Chief Justice, and it got kind of crossing ideological lines. Justice Barrett and three of the liberal justices joining to say that the president just does not have the authority to redefine what it means to be a citizen in this country with the stroke of a pen by an executive order, because the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, the Citizenship Clause, defines what that means. And that's our long-held belief, that if you're born in this country on U.S. soil, that you're a U.S. citizen. Of course, President Trump, with that executive order that he signed on Inauguration Day, said that, you know, immigration and illegal immigration was a lot different now than it was, and that, you know, while maybe the Constitution, people it thought that it had this broader meaning that really should just apply to the formerly enslaved people and their descendants. That was the purpose of it, and not to people who are here undocumented or temporarily, or even for birth tourism. Again, the court really firmly rejecting that argument and closing it off, saying that the Constitution is clear. I was a little surprised that the case was as close as it was. Justice Kavanaugh joined in another part of the opinion, not the main constitutional part of the holding, and we had three justices, conservative justices, in dissent. So I thought after the argument it wasn't quite clear how many were going to be in dissent on that. So there were the three staunchest conservatives, and I'm sure the president will be quoting from some of the language of some of those dissents. But in his opinion, for the majority, the Chief Justice really just resounding language, stirring language, talking about the purpose of citizenship and what it means to be a citizen in this country, and that they are not going to disturb that long-held belief.
Yeah, and the other major ruling upholds states' ban on transgender athletes in women's and also girls' sports. So what did the court rule here, and what was ultimately left undecided?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is obviously the last day of what's been a momentous term, and we got two of the biggest cases, you know, right on the very last day. That social issue case that has deeply divided the states and this country and our politics, whether or not states can ban transgender athletes from participating in women's sports, whether in middle school, high school, or college. It was a case involving laws from Idaho and West Virginia that banned transgender athletes, and then, of course, some challenged that. 27 states have these bans, more than half. Two others ban it by policy. And today, the court said that those bans did not violate the Constitution or federal law, Title IX, that landmark legislation from 1972 that really leveled the playing field for girls' sports, that states were free to ban you know, transgender athletes from participating in girls' sports if that's what they chose to do. Now, other states, of course, like California, New York, and others, allow transgender athletes to participate, and they can continue to do that. The court made clear that they're not addressing those states. There's been some lawsuits challenging that participation. They're not deciding that issue. They're going to allow those states to continue to allow transgender participation. But the states that want to do it, the court said it's entirely reasonable.
And do you think this case just really comes down to states having the power to make certain decisions as opposed to the federal government?
Well, not quite, but it is similar to how they decided the last major transgender case last year on whether or not states could ban so-called gender-affirming care, puberty blockers, and hormone treatments for minors. They kind of left that up to the states and allowed some of those bans to remain in place. But here they're saying that there's nothing in the Constitution or in a federal law that seems to prohibit it now. But they're leaving open other things. It's a narrow ruling that's very focused on sports. They're leaving open other areas of the law. For example, passports. I mean, some of the things that we've obviously seen debated recently for transgender rights. They're not ruling on that. It's very focused on sports.
And then finally, the High Court also struck down federal limits on campaign financing. First, I'm sort of curious what this really means. So can you break down what this ultimately means when it comes to politics? I mean, the midterms are just around the corner. How does this change anything?
Well, it's going to really, I think, kind of embolden political parties. And you're going to see, and Democrats and Republicans took different positions on this. Republicans were kind of pushing for the political parties to be able to coordinate their expenditures with the candidates. Democrats were arguing against that. The court today said that any restrictions on those kind of coordinated expenditures that political parties would want to do, well, that violates the First Amendment. That's obviously an argument we saw some of the justices thinking that some of their other rulings may have really weakened the political parties and led to an explosion of some of these like dark money PACs and super PACs. And so there is some argument that it may kind of restore some of that power back to the political parties. But again, like with everything, Mugo, this seems to be divided again. You know, the Democrats were on one side and Republicans were on the other. And I agree with you that it will have an impact on the midterms. And many people suggest that right now, because of the way the mechanisms are placed and how the different parties raise money right now, it may end up benefiting Republicans in the short term.
Okay, Jan Crawford, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.